So hi there everybody. So what I would like to do today is to talk about the GH5. I've been a GH5 shooter since the camera came out, and I'm really enjoying the camera. It's such a big upgrade from the GH4. I made the decision to actually keep the GH4 as my B camera, and I've maybe shot 4 or 5 maybe projects where I've used the GH5, which I'm actually shooting this on, as an A camera, and I've used the GH4 as a B camera. But I've had some issues with that. Issue number one is that many of the features that I really enjoy with the GH5, I mean the 4K 60 is one of them, for slow-mo is great. The IBIS is also great on the GH5. The better autofocus is also a wonderful thing. I'm not saying it's perfect, we all know it's not perfect. Let's hope the upcoming firmware will change that. But there are quite a few things that make the GH5 so much better camera than the GH4. And for me, those are actually quite key features, which has made my life a little bit harder. Because when I'm on a shoot, and I tend to have my GH5 in a rig, where I use it on a tripod or handheld and stuff like that. And I tried to use the GH4 on my gimbal, but the thing there is that when I'm using the gimbal, the IBIS on the GH5 makes that experience so much better and the footage looks sweeter. The same thing for the 4K 60. I've actually, even though I've had the GH4 as a B camera, I've tended to just carry it on and use it for interviews as a second angle. And that's not a good way to use a B camera. The B camera that I've used for like 4 or 5 projects has more or less not been used because I've just taken the GH5 and changed the setup so I could use the GH5 because of all those features. So one thing that I feel that is not really talked about on the internet when it comes to the GH5 is the difference in color science on the sensor. But for me, the different color science on the sensor is actually quite a big thing. On the shoots that I've had the GH5 and the GH4, I'm not saying it's been a problem matching the color between the two cameras, but it has been work. It hasn't always been seamless. The more I've thought about a second B camera, I've had to think about, okay, which are the things that I really want in a B camera, and what do I actually do with the B camera? First off, I use my B camera mainly on the gimbal. So I have one camera on a gimbal and I have one camera on a tripod, or that I use handheld. And on the shoots that I've had so far with the GH4 and the GH5, I've had the GH4 on a gimbal. When you are shooting on a gimbal, it's really nice to have better autofocus. It's really nice to have the 4K 60, and the IBIS on the GH5 is really nice. So those 3 features made the GH5 far superior to the GH4 on a gimbal. And I have the Zion crane, and with the small cable attached between the Zion crane gimbal and the GH5, I can actually focus with the thumb control, which is really nice. On the shoots that I've been so far, I've tended to use more or less only the GH5. So when I've had to use the gimbal, I've put the gimbal on the GH5, and when I've had to use it for the camera for static shots, I've put the GH5 on the tripod. So it has actually been a little bit of a hustle to take the camera off and on the tripod onto the gimbal and stuff like that. The only times when I've actually used the GH4 has been as a second angle on interviews. And for interviews, it's really nice to know that the GH5 has unlimited recording. So when thinking for options for the GH5 and the B cameras that I could use, you actually have to think what you're gonna do with your B camera. So for me, it was mainly have a camera for the gimbal and as a second angle in interviews. And I was actually thinking about the Canon 80D but it likes 4K, and that is a deal breaker for me. I was thinking about the Sony's A63 or A6500, but the battery life on those is too weak for me, and I really don't like the overheating. I can't have a camera that overheats, so they were actually not an option. So my options were looking at the other Micro Four Thirds cameras, because I really like the ability to use all my lenses, because I've sold more or less all my Canon lenses. I only have one left. So I was looking at the G80, G85. I own the GX80. It's a nice small camera, but it's not a professional grade camera, I would say. I was actually looking at getting a second GH5. I was thinking of an Olympus maybe. After thinking about which features I really like, I mean the 4K 60, in-body stabilization, unlimited recording. In the end, my choice was to actually get a second GH5 and use it as a B camera. And I've had one shoot where I've used both of these cameras, and one of the cameras I've had on a gimbal on the Zion crane, and the other camera I've had rigged up on either a tripod or handheld. And that setup has been really nice, and even in editing, not to think about the color difference in color size, was really nice. So I'm really happy with that. What actually makes it even better is that now that we know how the next firmware is going to look on the GH5, we know that it's going to get a much better codec than the G80. It's better codec than the Olympus cameras, and it's going to be far superior in that regard. So I'm really happy that I made the decision to get a second GH5. And I know there are many people out there who are going to say, yeah, that's really obvious, smartass. If you have any questions or want to ask me something, please feel free to write in the comments. You can add me on Instagram. My name there is Arber. You can also add me on stuffsmart. So just for full disclosure, stuffsmart is actually an app that me and two other guys are working on. It's an app where we want people to review stuff and put their stuff up and stuff like that. So it's called stuffsmart. So that you know, it's an app that me and two other guys are working on. So back to the video. It's an iOS app where you can show off all your gear and stuff that you have. My name there is also Arber, and if you want to see what gear I actually use, go into the stuffsmart app and add me. And if you have any questions there, you just ask me and I'll get back and reply. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know which camera you use as a B camera and if you're happy with it. Bye bye.